This is LCC Radio, WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan. This is the Lansing Online News Radio Show with Bonnie Bucqueroux and Bill Castaneer. Our first guest coming up quickly tonight is Drew Howard, my husband, and he is going to be headed down to the Green Door later. So we put him on at the very beginning because he's going to tell us a little bit about a show coming up here in town.
Well, first I'm going to tell you that I'm playing at the Green Door with Eldon Kelly in Next Step, and if you want to see some fireworks, go see Eldon Kelly because he's amazing.
He's a spectacular player.
And yeah, so I'm subbing tonight because the organist is in Texas. I don't play organ; I play steel guitar, so they need a warm body to take hand signals. At any rate, I want to talk quickly about Seth Bernard's show. Seth is the founder of Earthwork Music, which is an arts collective that I'm a member of and possesses a lot of amazing people that are musicians and scientists and environmentalists. And they host a couple of great festivals up north, the Family Weekend and also Harvest Gathering, which feature fantastic music from around the state particularly, but around the country. And so at any rate, he's released an album, and I have the name here, Reconciliation of the Mystical Beyonda, the new CD by Seth Bernard. And so he's doing a bunch of CD release shows around the state. And this Friday, May 23rd at 8 p.m., he'll be performing at the Avenue Cafe.
Former Gone Wired Cafe. Right on Michigan Avenue.
On Michigan Avenue, I think it's $10 to get in.
We can't mention price.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, we can't even say if it's free, but it isn't.
Okay, I'll back up. He's got a band with him, a small band. I think the drummer Dan plays with the Crane Wives. Max Lockwood on bass. He's got an opener, which I neglected to write down. But come one, come all. It's a great show with my friend Seth.
It's Friday night. What time will the doors open? Do you know?
I have no idea.
But I would
They're
assume.
open.
Okay, 7 or 8 in the evening, something like
Well,
that.
the show's at 8, so the doors would be, let's say 7 o'clock. Let's hazard a guess.
And
but there's a go on Facebook and put Seth Bernard and Avenue Cafe in there, and you'll find out more info.
Will his wife May Erlewine and the little baby be there?
No.
No.
As far as I know, they won't be.
Too bad.
So
he's a new daddy.
Yeah, he's a new daddy, little baby Iris. So I haven't seen the baby yet. So yeah, so that's what's going on. If you're bored tonight, I'm playing at the Green Door. Come on down, get your mind blown by some amazing monster musicians, or show up Friday. So those are your choices, tonight or Friday, but you have to do either one, okay?
How about both?
Okay, sure, both, fine.
Okay, thank you very much. Wonderful.
Yeah, so thank you for having me on, and see you later.
This is the Speed Demon version. So tonight at the Green Door and Friday night at the Avenue Cafe with Seth Bernard. Great. I have it as Reconciliation and the Mystical Beyond, but I don't think it makes any difference since I don't know what any of it means.
Is this a religious show?
Yes, I guess so. Now, you had a couple announcements as well.
I did, and I'll make them very fast. Capital Area District Library this week, downtown, has 2 authors in. On Wednesday, they have Dennis Hale, who is the sole survivor of a 1966 shipwreck that took 28 of his seamen that were with him to their death. And he's written a book called Shipwrecked Reflections of the Sole Survivor. They went down in Lake Huron the last trip of the season, November 30th of 1966. So he's lived with that his whole life, which is better being dead, but I think he's gone through a lot of grief, a lot of trouble.
So he was plucked from the water?
Yes, the next 40 hours later.
Oh.
No, he was in a raft, a life raft, but it was 40 hours later. They'd been dumped in the water, though. So they got nice and cold. And there were 3 men with him that died in that raft. They didn't make it through the night.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's
brutal story.
It's a pretty grim story, but he's a very interesting person to talk with. I talked with him earlier this week, and he's a fascinating man. Then there's Jim Daniels on Thursday, May 22nd. Jim Daniels is a professor at Carnegie Mellon University. I always say CMU, but that gets people confused.
It would, yeah.
Uh,
Depends
and-
on where your frame of reference
Right,
is.
and he's been there 33 years, but his writing all centers on Detroit, where he grew up.
Ah,
And he's a very popular writer. He writes poetry and short stories. He's not written a novel, but his most recent collection, Detroit Tales, reads like a novel because they're interrelated short stories and they have a theme. He says it's like a rock album.
Hmm.
So Dennis Hale is at 7 p.m. Wednesday
okay.
at the downtown branch. Jim Daniels, 7 p.m. Thursday, and they're both free. Whoops, we're not even supposed to say free. That's right. See, you
That's
got
right.
me confused.
Yeah.
I've never done that.
Well, now we've got Monday night, Wednesday night, Thursday night, Friday night.
I don't know what else. Yeah, somebody
Well-
might have to take a night off.
Well, but we have another event on Wednesday.
Okay, yes.
We have the Ride of Silence.
See, there was a segue.
There is a segue. I'm trying really hard to come up with a segue. And we're joined now by Larabee and Tim Potter, who are going to tell us a bit about this. This is an event that, if I get you to cozy up a bit for the camera here.
Close to the mic.
Yeah, those of you who know this is Lansing Online News Radio, but at the same time we webcast on our Lansing Online News .com site. So if you would like to watch as you listen, you can always go there and we archive our videos later up on YouTube, and that'll be kind of cool. But it's Wednesday night at Wells Hall. Tell us a little bit about the Ride of Silence.
Well, I'm Tim Potter, and I'm actually on the national board for the Ride of Silence, which started down in Dallas, Texas in 2003. And I took over the webmaster role as a volunteer webmaster in about 2006, and didn't really anticipate being much more than a temporary webmaster, but I'm still it. So it's kind of consumed a lot of my spare time. But it started with a guy named Chris Phelan, who had a friend, Larry Swartz, who was hit and killed by a passing school bus while he was out riding. He was a long-distance endurance bicyclist. And so Chris wanted to do something to remember his friend, and he just said, come on, folks, let's get together and do something. Let's go out and ride our bikes. And so he put out an invitation to meet up at a park in Dallas, and 1,000 people showed up for the very first Ride in Silence, which was kind of Chris's idea, just to be able to remember and honor his friend Larry. And the media was really quite captured by the whole spectacle, and they had a lot of good media coverage. So the next year, he didn't really think it was going to be more than just 1 year, but some other people in other states started saying, hey, we'd like to do something similar, and it just started spreading from there. And as of last year, which was the 10th anniversary year in 2013, there were 362 events worldwide. And so we had like on every continent. And so the one here in Lansing that we've been doing since 2007, I think there was one in Hazlitt for a couple of years in 2006, but last year we got about 165 people coming out, and that includes a group of about 10 of our local police officers that were also very supportive and come out to help control things and get us safely through intersections and whatnot. But basically it's a ride to remember and honor bicyclists who've been either hit and killed or seriously injured.
How long is the ride?
It's a very short and slow ride. We don't go any faster than 12 miles an hour, and it's about 4 miles from campus to downtown to the state capitol. And we then have some words, and we talk. Some people tell their stories of people that they've either lost or they know of, or have had personal experiences with getting hit and injured. And then we ride back to campus. I mean, after the Capitol, it's pretty much people can talk and whatnot. But and then this year we're going to have a special little after party at the Avenue with special music by the fabulous Heftones. So hopefully some cute bicycle music to kind of just celebrate those of us who are
That
working.
bicycle built for two is on the agenda.
That will probably be on the agenda. How many other bicycle tunes they can come up with, we'll find out.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of.
Now, Anne, you have a personal connection to the race.
Yes, I do, and I go on the Ride of Silence every year when I'm in the country, and it's to honor my brother Dave, who was a very popular high school teacher. He was killed in 2005 by a panel van that ran a stop sign, and he would ride his bike home from the high school every day, and so one of those days he was killed. I have a picture of him here. He was only 41 years old. And I've ridden in Toledo where he was killed before, and they stop at the high school where he taught for a moment of silence. And for me, this is an incredibly moving event. Um, it's a way of remembering my wonderful brother, um, and having friends around who are riding with me is really meaningful for me. So even after these many years, he was, as I said, he was killed in 2005. It's very, very meaningful for me to do this ride in silence and to think about him.
It's interesting that they decided to do it in silence. That must make it an unusual event. I mean, for the people participating, that must be um, unlike anything else that people do.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, since I'm the webmaster, I get all the post-event reports, and so I read a lot of people saying that they consider it the most meaningful and powerful bike-related event that they do each year. And
Yes, in Lansing and I think in other state capitals, the ride is also raising bike safety awareness. We have people like Tim and other folks around town are really interested in raising awareness. And since we ride to the Capitol, we can make a kind of public statement about bike safety as well. Other rides in other communities are silent throughout, so there's no real safety emphasis. But ours does emphasize bike safety, both for bicyclists and for drivers. So the idea is to raise awareness, make bicyclists more visible on the roads, to let people know that they need to pay attention when they're driving.
It's such a problem because I know I've had friends on the Delmac. I've also been on the roads going up to Mackinac at the time the Delmac was on the side of the road. And cars and bikes don't fit well together in some circumstances. And we haven't done a very good job in this country of making bike lanes safer, have we? I mean, there's a lot to be done that we could do to make things safer for cyclists.
well, there's been a lot of progress in the last 10 years or so, I would say, all over the country, since there's been a lot of concerted effort to increase both the safety campaigns and also the facilities on the street. I mean, here I'm, say, on the MSU campus, just in the year 2000, we had no bike lanes whatsoever. And now we've got like 70% of our campus roads now have bike lanes. And you're seeing them all over Lansing and East Lansing. In other smaller towns, every time they redo a road now, they're doing what's called a complete street application, where they're making the streets safer and much more enjoyable for everybody that uses the streets, and not necessarily just for the automobiles.
But I did watch a film from Copenhagen that showed that if you make those a barrier so that people can't just drift over, it does make a huge difference, and we haven't committed to that here yet.
Tim, what's the 1, 2, or 3 things a bicyclist could do to maintain safety or help maintain safety, and what could they do?
Well, I always talk about trying to avoid an accident being the primary focus of what I talk about. So to me, being visible, highly visible, wearing something very visible, unlike this black shirt I wore.
And you wrote down here, I just want to make
I wrote
everyone
down
knows
here,
that.
and I rarely just wear dark clothing, but I've got super bright lights that I use all the time in addition to what I wear. Yeah, flashing strobe lights. Some people say that the strobe is not very good because some motorists are drawn to it like something and then they fixate on it. I don't know. I don't get into trying to figure that out, but just being visible and using good bright lights front and rear is, to me, really critical. And then riding where it's safer. And a lot of people assume that it's always safer on the sidewalks, and they'll always tend to gravitate towards the sidewalks. And that's where a lot of conflicts happen. So you can go really slow to work. So if you're not really too concerned about getting there very fast, going on the sidewalk is, especially if you're with younger children and whatnot and not really sure of yourself, that's probably the safer place to be. But if you're trying to get somewhere for transportation, having to stop at every intersection with cars that block your way, or it's pretty amazingly different to ride in the road as a vehicle of the road, which is what I do and other people do who are kind of trying to get places on their bikes. That to me is the faster and much safer way to get to where you want to go. Other than that, I mean, there's wearing a helmet, is also a very important thing, but that to me is, where a lot of people focus most of their attention when they talk about bike safety, but that is really only helpful after you get in an accident. So I really spend a lot of my time, and when I write about it, I try to talk a lot about the other issues that involve preventing an accident. So that's
Do
my
people have to
focus.
pre-register? Is there a place where they can go to let you know they're coming, or
No,
are there things they need to know, or?
there's no registration required. We do have a Facebook page that is just out there to disseminate information, and so you can click on join if you want, if that makes you feel better. You can see, you know, other people that say they're going, but it's not required, and there's no additional
Helmets are
information.
required.
Yes, they are.
Right.
Yes,
I
that
should
would
add
be,
that.
yeah.
And children can come as well
Thanks,
on the
Ann.
ride.
That would be nice to bring a whole family out for an event like this. Are
And
there
we
many
do.
organized rides in the community? Does
Oh, yes.
Tri-County Bicycle, and are they participating in this at all, or
Thanks
supporting
for
it?
asking. Yes, it is a Tri-County Bike Association event. They host it and they're sponsoring it. And so it's one of their rides, and it's actually organized through a group of volunteers that are part of the TCBA advocacy committee. So Ann and I are on that committee, as are several others that, like Mike Unsworth is the chair of the advocacy committee. And he's over at Lansing City Hall accepting a resolution for the Ride of Silence tonight while we speak. So, but I should also add real quickly that in the morning there is a statewide advocacy event that starts at 8 a.m. that comes down to the state capitol too. They both happen on the same day, and that's more of a state issues level lobbying day basically for bicycling. So if you're interested in that, you can go to lmb.org and get information about that event, which is a wonderful event to
It is
come out and-
wonderful, yeah. And it's many people advocating for bicyclists with state legislators, so.
Part of the challenge is just making drivers aware that they have to be alert. I think it's so easy. I used to ride a little Honda Dream motorcycle, and I gave up motorcycling once I looked right into the eyes of the woman who was just ready to plow into me, and she just somehow didn't register. And that's a challenge, so I don't know. I mean, we try to do everything we can to draw
Right.
attention to ourselves and break that, but that's a huge issue.
I think for me, even though I lost my brother in a cycling accident, I ride for him, and I ride in defiance, I think.
Do you?
Yes.
Uh-huh. Good. So you're not afraid to ride as a result.
Right.
Good, good.
How many people get killed each year in bicycling accidents?
In Michigan, we're fortunately still in the 20s, which is still more than what you would like to see, but nationwide it's generally between 600-700 in a given year, which the numbers haven't really fallen too much. There have been some national numbers showing that motor vehicle related accidents for occupants of motor vehicles has fallen faster. So the percentage
Right.
of pedestrian and bicycling fatalities are actually kind of increasing if you look at the total numbers. So there's national campaigns underway to
Of
try
course,
to.
Michigan with the polar
correct
vortex
that.
from last year. I mean, there's a significant portion of the year where you're not going to have people out on their bicycles. Yes. Well,
That's
this
very
is.
true.
Thank you very much for coming in and telling us. That is
Thank you.
Wednesday. You would meet at Wells Hall on the MSU campus, which is on Red Cedar Street.
Yes, you can.
What is
Go-
well, people who are not familiar with campus, how can they get there quickly?
Well, it'd be good to go online and look at a map. Of Wells Hall is on Red Cedar, right near the Red Cedar River,
Come in on
behind the
Trowbridge,
National Center.
right
Yeah,
next to the stadium.
next to the stadium. That's probably
That'll
the
be the
easiest.
easiest way for people to
So I
find
think you
it.
can park at the south of the stadium. That is a gated visitor lot, I believe. So if you are driving in, then you can park there,
Give
or
us-
just ride your bike in.
Give us the time again.
We start staging at 5:30 and we leave at 6:30. So come no later than 6 to get all your instructions and other things.
Ride in Silence, Wednesday evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
It's
Bonnie.
good to see you making a statement with this and honoring your brother at the same time. Thank you for telling us about that.
Thanks very much, Bonnie, for having us.
This is LCC Radio, WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan. And we're going to be talking next with my friend Bob Pratt. If we can get him a mic there, we'll get it right up on top of him. Bob was the Fire Marshal of East Lansing. Was that the proper title?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, and he retired from that position, and he is really an advocate for water safety. Now we're going to make a shift into water safety. And Bob has educated me a lot because I really wasn't aware of the fact that it can be very difficult to realize somebody's in trouble in the water. And we have this sort of vision, I guess, from movies of people flailing away and, putting up big splashes and
Right.
so forth. And that isn't how people get into trouble.
One of the big problems that we have is that Hollywood has sold us a bill of goods with respect to what drowning actually looks like.
Ah,
Going all the way back to the Tarzan movies, if you look at, back when Johnny Weissmuller was Tarzan, there's film of Jane in the water, flailing, waving her arms, screaming for several minutes while Tarzan swings from tree to tree, all the way up to our Baywatch shows where
oh, yeah.
where Mitch Buchanan is out rowing in a boat and someone flips over in another boat and proceeds to yell and wave and carry on.
And
And-
anybody just watched Pam Anderson anyhow, that's always
Right, and so what happens is people believe that drowning is going to be a very loud, very visual event, when in fact it's going to be very, very subtle.
Yeah.
And people who are drowning can't wave because if they were to lift their arms up, physics is going to drop their body in the water because your arms weigh more out of the water. So
You become an arrow.
you simply can't wave. So if you lift your arms up, you're going to submerge, and instinctively people understand that that's a problem. They're also struggling very difficultly, and so imagine if you ran to the top of a 10-story building. How loud could you yell? You're just so winded from running that you're unable to yell. So
And you're gulping water.
and you may be gulping water. You're trying to keep your mouth up and trying to breathe. So if you're not waving and you're not yelling, you're doing what we call climbing the ladder, which is making motions in the water, trying to keep your mouth up. So if you see someone who's vertical in the water with their head back and their mouth open, that's a very dangerous sign. And then other things like hair in the face, a look of panic. They just look like they're uncomfortable. And believe it or not, a drowning victim will only stay at the surface of the water for 15 to 45 seconds.
What?
And then
That's
they'll
what shocks
submerge,
me so much.
and,
Why
and
is
then they'll
that?
be gone.
Why is that?
It's because they simply can't keep themselves afloat. And once they start to inhale water, once they start to, first they'll start to ingest the water. First they'll start to swallow the water instinctively. That will lessen their buoyancy. That will make them less buoyant in the water. It will remove air from their stomach. Then when they start to inhale the water, that's really when the buoyancy becomes a huge problem, because that's really what keeps us afloat. If you're relaxed in the water, you take a big lungful of air, you've got this huge buoyant bubble that's going to keep you at the surface. As you start to panic and hyperventilate, you're going to have less and less and less air. As you start to aspirate that, as you start to fill your lungs with water, you're going to sink.
Mm.
But
You
we're
know, I've
kind of
been
downer
close twice.
subjects here today. We're talking
Yeah,
about the
we're
ride of silence. We're talking about drowning. But the good news is that most drownings are preventable. The vast majority of drownings are preventable.
Don't get yourself in the spot in the first
Don't get
place.
yourself in the spot in the first place, but also if you're a parent, recognize what drowning looks like. If you're a caregiver and you have a backyard pool or you're going to the beach, make sure that you designate someone to watch the water all the time. If you believe that you can read a magazine and your children will call out to you if there's a problem, that can be a deadly mistake. So make sure that someone is designated to watch the children in the water all the time, and that will go a long, long way to preventing drowning.
Well, there's fewer and fewer lifeguards too, isn't there?
Right. Our beaches in the state of Michigan have fewer and fewer lifeguards, but lifeguards also, I'm a
Don't bank
huge
on
I'm a
them being
huge
able-
advocate,
yeah.
of lifeguards, and always swim near a lifeguard when possible. But especially at some of the pools and some of the beaches, you're putting your child's life in the hands of a 15, 16, 17-year-old.
That's the other
child.
shocker. It's not just in a lake where you can't see. It happens in pools.
Oh, it does happen in pools, and believe it or not, you can't see the bottom of a pool. There's a strange phenomenon that happens. The next time you're at a pool, take a look. When the water starts to ripple, if there's 2 or 3 people in the water,
Oh.
it really obscures the bottom of the pool. So if you miss that person going down, we've had several drownings in schools recently. We had 2
Yeah.
in Detroit. We had 2 in Minnesota while class was going on. And what happens is we've done a terrible job of insisting that teachers can also be lifeguards, which we know is impossible. However, with all the budget cuts, it seems to an administrator, well, they're there anyway. They can also lifeguard while they're teaching, but you can't adequately lifeguard and teach, when there's 30 kids in the pool. Add the fact that you can't see the bottom of the pool because of the disruption at the surface and the glare caused by it. That person goes down silently without being noticed by anyone, and it's usually after the class is over. As the students
Yeah.
all leave,
Yeah.
the water starts to calm down. You start to be able to see the bottom of the pool, and suddenly you notice that there's a child in there.
That's just terrible. Now, are we seeing fewer kids learning how to swim because of the shortage of classes and recreational pools?
We are. We're seeing a lot of the pools in the United States were built in the 50s and 60s. As a result, they're 50, 60 years old, and they're in need of a lot of maintenance. And so rather than spend the money,
Yeah.
LCC is a prime example.
Oh, really?
That the pool at LCC is
It's
no
gone.
longer,
Oh, it's gone.
Mhm.
it is now a food court.
Oh, really?
Even affluent
Shows
communities
you how
like,
often I used it, but I mean,
like East Lansing, the middle school no longer has a pool.
so that's the wave of the future is schools without pools, apparently.
Unfortunately, it really is, and as a result, we need to use some new things in the way that we teach children how to swim. We need to do some education early on, and believe it or not, drowning is the leading cause of accidental death worldwide. And in areas like Bangladesh, it is an amazing problem. They're starting to use portable pools. You just look shocked, and I know we're on the radio, but here, even in the United States, drowning is the second leading cause of accidental death in children under 14. It's the leading cause of accidental death in children 1 to 4.
Wow.
Right? And it doesn't have the advocacy that other events do. I came from the fire service. As fire marshal, we had a big budget to do fire prevention activities.
yeah.
We have a week in October that's dedicated to fire prevention. Every year in our schools, we're required to do 9 fire drills and 2 tornado drills and 2 defend in place drills. Drowning in the United States kills more people than fire, tornadoes, lightning, and school shootings all combined.
See, I was president of the Michigan Rural Safety Council 40 years ago, and we never mentioned. I mean, and yet now that I think back on it, I mean, obviously with farm ponds and gravel pits and all of the places that kids like to go and hang out and be away from adults, that's another big
Right.
concern.
So let's get off the downer part for a little bit, and
Yep.
let's talk about what you can do.
Although I do
Um,
have to tell you one story. I was 10 years old. We moved to a lake. My mother was watching me. I got into real trouble. I was going down for the 3rd time when my mother finally, with the 4th inner tube, got it close enough to me that I was able to grab it. Never trusted my mother after that because it was clear to me she was not going to come in and get me.
Do you swim?
Huh?
Do you swim?
I do now.
Do you? Okay.
I didn't know how to then. I slipped off a
So
drop off.
Safe for Swimmers is one of the big 3 keys, and the Safe for 3 Foundation has identified 3 main areas that we need to focus on if we're going to make a real impact in drowning, and that's Safe for Swimmers, teaching your children how to swim,
Okay.
teaching adults how to swim, safer water, making sure that, for example, if your backyard pool, you have gates and fences and they self-lock, and making sure the patio doors, for example, are shut. They have pool alarms now, and then a safer response. So after an event happens, do you know how to safely rescue somebody? Unfortunately, every year we have people who are would-be rescuers that end up as victims themselves, and then really super important for parents to know how to do CPR and recognize that compression-only CPR is not appropriate for drowning victims. Drowning victims need to have the mouth-to-mouth along with the compressions if they're in cardiac arrest.
Really?
Yeah, because if you have a cardiac event and your heart stops because you have a heart attack, then your lungs are full of oxygenated air, and getting the heart started is primary. When you have a drowning victim, their heart is usually in pretty good shape, but their lungs are full of water, or their lungs are full of air that doesn't have oxygen in it, and so we really need to get those breaths in there. It becomes
So
key.
you're putting no, actually be exhaling carbon dioxide.
Well, but you're still exhaling about 12%.
I see. Okay.
And so that's enough to keep someone alive.
Well, you know, my parents lived at Clark Lake after I had moved out, and my father had a young man who did some yard work for him. He was a young man from Greece, and he'd actually been on the Greek Olympic swim team.
Oh, wow.
And he ran into trouble because he was swamped by some water skiers that went by and apparently panicked. My father, just assuming that this was a relatively small young man, he was 5'4", 5'5", something like that. My father at 6'3" was sure he'd have no difficulty rescuing him. The young man drowned, and my father was pulled out of the water unconscious. He was
Wow.
absolutely stunned. I mean, people think that that a big person could just go in and save somebody, but you need special training, don't you?
As a lifeguard, one of the most embarrassing events that happened to me was at Grand River Park, which is now Birchfield Park in Holt. where I was a young, very fit, very well trained lifeguard, and didn't take a piece of equipment with me, and was nearly drowned by a very tiny 12-year-old girl.
See, yeah.
So absolutely, one of the things that we do when we teach people is that safer response. One of the safer three: safer swimmers, safer water, safer response. Always take something that floats with you. If you're going to try to attempt to rescue, and we've done trainings all over the Great Lakes region, and we have never had a situation where we've been at the beach and there hasn't been something that would float and would keep someone afloat enough to get them help.
Well, you do Great Lakes Surf Rescue, and you do it with surfboards, don't you?
We do it with surfboards. Surfboards are a great flotation device. Boogie boards make a great flotation device. A plastic cooler is a decent flotation device and could float the three of us here.
Really?
Absolutely, absolutely. Beach balls, Nerf footballs, you name it. There's something at the beach.
Now, do you push that at the person
Absolutely.
so that they don't?
Make sure it stays between you and the victim
Okay.
so that they can't grab you.
Yeah.
Don't do it unless you're very skilled in the water. Don't do it unless you practice. Don't become a statistic.
But I mean, it would be very hard if you saw something like that unfolding in front of you, even
Right.
if you hadn't had the training.
Right.
Our instinct would be to help. Are
And
you better off not helping?
At a lot of our beaches and pools, we have throwing devices. We have throw rings
Okay.
that you can actually throw to a person. Actually, in Holland, Michigan, last year, we had a situation where an on-duty parks person and an off-duty Coast Guard person saved 23 people in one day using the throw rings. We have dangerous currents on the Great Lakes, and there was a very strong longshore current running from the north to the south. And if you've ever been to Holland State Park, the pier comes off at a little bit of an angle, and the current was just sweeping people right off the beach from the swim area right out along the pier, and they were pulling them in. They refer to it as pulling them in like salmon, using the throw rings. So absolutely, make sure that you have swimming ability. If there's something that floats nearby, throw that to the person. If you are an excellent swimmer, if you're a previous lifeguard, consider making that swimming rescue, but realize your risk increases dramatically when you take something on like that.
Well, I'll forgive my mother now because she didn't know how to swim. So she probably did the right thing.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. She easily could have been a victim.
This is LCC Radio, WLNZ 89.7. We're talking with Bob Pratt of the Great Lakes Surf Rescue. And Bob, I wanted to ask you, in the summers, then you're part of a volunteer group that goes out and you're trying to make the Great Lakes safer. This is a new organization that you're part of?
We've been an organization since 2010.
Okay.
And we really have two purposes. One is the educational piece that we do, but the other is the statistical research. We're the only group that does statistical analysis of the drownings on the Great Lakes. When we first started, I thought it would be very easy to find out how many people drown on the Great Lakes, but it's very difficult, and the drowning numbers are difficult in themselves to get because of HIPAA laws now, but also because, for example, if you drive your car into the Red Cedar River and you die from drowning in your vehicle, that's not considered a drowning. That's considered a motor vehicle accident.
Really?
If you fall off your boat in Lake Lansing, that's not considered a drowning. That's considered a boating accident. So the 220 young women or young people who drown in Korea and the ferry boat, they will not be counted in the worldwide drowning statistics.
Wow.
Right. So
is there any those studies that you do? Is there any indication about, say, teenagers and above about alcohol and swimming?
It's been proposed that alcohol is a huge problem, and we're finding that it's really not that big of a problem. The biggest problem on the Great Lakes is the wind and the waves, and people underestimate the power of the waves. They underestimate their ability in the waves, particularly adolescent males. And males drown at 4 times the rate that females drown at. Bonnie, I'll ask you why.
Well, don't ask me after Jill Abramson got fired.
Men are stupid, and we have proof of that. The Red Cross actually did a study, and they had males estimate their swimming ability, and they were much more inept at predicting their true swimming ability than women.
I saw a great meme on Facebook the other day. It said, because of their stubbornness, men die 7 years earlier than they should. And there was a comment right below that said, no, we don't.
Right.
So that kind of tells you.
So last year on the 5 Great Lakes, there were 68 fatal drownings. The year before, there were 103,
Wow.
and typically half of those.
Was it the weather conditions?
A lot of it's the weather conditions. We find the most dangerous conditions are when it's warm and when there's wave action. And if that corresponds with a weekend or a holiday, you can almost be guaranteed that there will be fatalities.
Now, when you talked about those 23 rescues in one day, isn't there someone or some policy where they close a beach so that people can't go into the water, or how does that work?
Personally, I'm opposed to closing beaches.
Oh, really?
Because of the unintended consequences. For example, if we decided to close the beach at Holland State Park, what would people do? Simply stay out of the water? Or would they move down to the beach?
A nice secluded place where nobody sees them.
Right, which may be farther from safety, maybe farther from emergency services. It may be less well known to emergency services. And so ideally, the solution is to get well-trained, well-supervised lifeguards back on our beaches. I think that's probably 10 to 15 years off, but I think that it's coming. We did the first training for surf lifeguards open to the public in the Great Lakes region last year with the International Surf Lifesaving Association. We trained 17 lifeguards to an ocean standard. And there are a few pockets of lifeguards that are that well trained, but we're working to increase that number throughout the Great Lakes region. One of the problems is we don't have lifeguards that are trained to a surf standard like they need to be for the Great Lakes. But again, that goes back to our safer water and a safer response there.
Well, I learned years ago that if you're caught in what they call a riptide, and I guess even that's a misnomer, but the idea is that most people get exhausted trying to come straight in back to shore, when in reality they should try to swim perpendicular to the shore. Is that true?
That's generally true in the ocean. Unfortunately, on the Great Lakes, more than 65% of our fatal drowning, of all of our events, whether they're rescues or non-fatal drownings or fatal drownings, 65% of them occur around the structures. And so if you think about, well, docks and piers and jetties, if you think about swimming parallel to shore, does that mean you're swimming into the rocks of the jetty that may be awash with big waves? Or does that mean swimming directly away from the jetty, which seems counterintuitive, because there may be people on the pier with throw rings? So what we teach people is to flip, float, and follow, which is kind of like stop, drop, and roll.
Flip, float, and follow.
So flip over onto your back.
Yes.
Which does a couple of things. One is it raises your center of gravity, your center of buoyancy in the water. We talked about your lungs filling with air, and if you can relax, calm yourself down, take nice, big, deep breaths full of air, you'll be much more buoyant. You'll be much less apt to panic. So flip over onto your back, float to see which direction the current is carrying you, and then follow a safe course back to safety. And that's kind of confusing. What we mean by that is don't swim against the current. The same thing if the typical rip current is running straight offshore, like we see in a lot of the ocean rip currents, swimming straight back to shore is staying on that treadmill, fighting against the current, and swimming parallel to shore will get you off of that current. So if you're floating and you realize which way the current is pulling you, just realize you don't want to try and fight against it.
But isn't the fear it's going to take me further out?
And it may take you further out.
And you should still do that?
Yes, because your options are to fight against the current and tire yourself out very quickly, or to float and go with the current and hopefully alert somebody that there's a problem. They can hopefully throw a throw ring to you or swim something out to you, or we can call emergency services. But if you recognize that you don't, the most important thing is not to panic.
That's the key, isn't it?
It really is one of the big keys, is that if you can control that panic, there's no such thing as undertow. There's nothing that's going to pull you underwater.
Okay.
And realize and stay away from structures. I mean, the structures are very, very dangerous. And if you're caught in a typical rip current, even on the ocean, it's only going to pull you between the sandbars. It's a channel that's been cut in the sandbar, and when the waves wash over the sandbar, the water has to go out, and it follows the path of least resistance through this little channel. But if you're talking about a longshore current or a structural rip current, it can take you the whole length of that structure.
Wow. It's just amazing. I mean, water is something to be respected, there's no doubt. I'm really glad that you came and told us this. I'm gonna invite you again. I have been working on a video with Bob for years, but we've never done one out at the lake where he can show me some things.
That's
So
a,
maybe
that's a
there's
good
some.
idea.
It is.
When I was when I've been a freshman at MSU, had a canoeing class and we were indoors, and a guy went to the bottom and we just happened to see him. He was down there, but he lived.
Wow.
We just had an unfortunate fatal drowning at a school with the cardboard duct tape canoe science class.
Oh no.
Right. It's unfortunate, and we have no real. The statistics we gather on drowning are just horrible because there's no real stakeholders to hold people accountable.
So
But
do your figures include those other kinds of accidents, or do you stick to the traditional?
no, we cover all the drownings that occur
Okay.
on the Great Lakes, and typically half of them happen on Lake Michigan, and half of those happen on the south end of Lake Michigan. So the south end of Lake Michigan is some of the most dangerous water in the world.
One closing bit of advice I hope you'll give us. If I do go in the water with my car, what do I do? I have one of those little orange thingies that will both cut my seatbelt and
Wonderful.
also knock out the window.
Absolutely.
Do you think I would ever find it in the trash in my car?
If it doesn't float, no.
I think that they make very small ones now.
Yeah,
The ones I have in my vehicles are on a lanyard hanging from the mirror. Now I
Oh,
know that
little.
hanging from the mirror is against the law because it obstructs your vision a little bit.
Too bad.
But, well, like I said, I look at life as a set of risks, and
Yeah.
the more you think about the risk and the more you make choices about the risk, the better off you are. To me, the risk of a
Yep.
little less visibility is overwhelmed by the knowledge that if my car goes in the water, I know exactly where that rescue device is.
That's great. No, that's
Yeah.
a good idea.
Pop the window very quickly, get out of the car as soon as you can. Do not try to ride the vehicle down to the bottom. It will fill up with water. There's no pocket of air like Hollywood tells you there is. It will fill up and you will drown. So open the window, take your seatbelt off, get out of the vehicle.
Okay, I will. I'm going to follow that advice.
Safer
Wow.
swimmer, safer water, safer response.
We're going to have Bob back again. This
Yeah.
is important
Fascinating.
stuff.
I
It
grew up
is.
on the lake, so it's interesting.
I
The
know.
river, the floodwaters, talking.
Oh yeah, turn around, don't drown. We lose more than 600 people drown in their
Yes.
vehicles in the United States every year. 600 people.
Well, on that cheery note, thank you to Bob Pratt. This is LCC Radio, WLNZ, here in Lansing, Michigan, 89.7 on the dial. And now I'm going to move the microphone over to, and also the webcam. I'm going to try to remember to get the webcam done here. And this is my friend Vic Hansens, who's been on the show before. And Vic has long been an advocate for medical marijuana, and I would call Vic. He's not a jailhouse lawyer because nobody succeeded in putting him in jail yet. Though I think people have tried.
7 hours once.
Oh, 7 hours
Yeah,
once.
once.
That's not bad.
But
Right.
Vic helps everybody with legal advice, and now he's gotten himself in a situation where he's going to be acting as his own attorney again. What's the situation that's happened to you, Vic?
Well, what happened from a time frame is that in 2008, the voters of Michigan passed a law making medical marijuana legal for certain people in the state of Michigan. And I was among the first 101 people that got certified as medical marijuana patients back in 2009. In 2011, the township that we own property in passed an ordinance basically trying to control the way that medical marijuana or where medical marijuana is grown in their township. And the problem with these types of ordinances is that if they are it doesn't even have to be in conflict. The word that's in our law is inconsistent. If these ordinances are inconsistent with the medical marijuana law, then they simply don't apply to the medical use of marijuana. And so back in 2011, when they passed this ordinance that tried to regulate where we can grow medical marijuana, I informed them that you can write all the ordinances that you want, but you cannot enforce a ordinance that's written by a township, a city, a county, whatever, even by the state, that is inconsistent with the medical marijuana law. The word is inconsistent. And inconsistent means against the intent. So they don't have to be in conflict with each other. One just simply has to try and prohibit what the other one allows. Well, we were visited on in
A lot,
January.
just to
Yeah,
clarify, a lot of these ordinances include things like you can't be within X number of feet of a school, or X number of feet of
and
a
in
church, or all of these kinds of things.
correct. And the problem with that, of course, is that what happens is if you live in a city, in an urban area, there's no place that you're not
Right.
within a
Yeah.
1,000 feet of a school. If you
So
have
the
a
real intent is to make sure people can't do it.
right, exactly. If you and that's the law that was checked out to find out whether or not they could write these types of ordinances and enforce them was in the city of Wyoming and several other municipalities. I think Rochester Hills, a few of the others down by Detroit, wrote ordinances where they simply said, "Hey, look, if it's against federal law, you can't do it."
Right.
Which means you would not be able to grow marijuana anywhere
Anywhere.
because, according to them, they think that's against federal law. Well, John Terbeek is a lawyer and an ex magistrate who is a medical marijuana patient and happens to live in Wyoming. So, of course, he informed his city council people, you can write this ordinance, you can't enforce it. And they said, well, we're going to write it and pass it anyway. We think we have to do this and blah, blah, blah. So he took them to court. In the district court and circuit court, John lost his case. They said, no, the Controlled Substance Act overrules state law, therefore you can't,
Right.
we can't enforce this law. And so it went to the appellate court. In the appellate court, they decided two things. First of all, the Controlled Substance Act does not conflict with the Michigan medical marijuana law for several reasons, not the least of which is we told them we can't change federal law. If you look at the Michigan medical marijuana law, it says, as an expected consequence of the law, starting with a word in 2B, consequently, changing state law will have the practical effect of protecting from arrest the vast majority of patients. We didn't say everybody.
Right.
Because we
The
couldn't
feds could
change.
still come in.
That's correct. We couldn't change federal law. They are supreme. However, they can't be commandeering. They can't tell us you have to enforce state law that we write. We have the right to enforce that or not. In addition to that, the Controlled Substance Act says in the Controlled Substance Act, Congress did not intend to occupy the entire field. Well, if Congress said we don't intend to occupy the
ceding this
entire
to the
field,
states, yeah.
exactly, and you're a court and you're reading this and you find out that, gee, the states have rights to run these types of experiments. That's the way that things have always been done.
Right.
So the federal law does not commandeer the state law. State law recognizes the
Now,
federal law.
Did Terbeek get decided at the Supreme Court level too? We left
Yes.
it in
Yes,
the
it did.
Yes.
In 2012, the appellate court published their decision and it was unanimous, 3-0. The Supreme Court just published their decision. I just got that decision like the day after we had this letter that came from the municipality telling us that we were breaking their local ordinance. Well, I downloaded and read their local ordinance. And what they're trying to do is say, look, if you are a medical marijuana patient or caregiver, you're giving up all of your Fourth Amendment rights because whenever the township decides to, we can just come in and inspect your house. Yeah. So
Do they need a warrant?
No, they don't need a warrant for that. No, they're going to have it inspected by the fire inspector, the electrical inspector, the plumbing inspector. Whether you said that you're going to make any improvements or changes to your property or not, they just have the right to do this, and you're supposed to register to let them do this.
Is
So,
this,
go ahead.
is this the first time this application has been made in the state?
Is this the first time that I am the first one, according to the officer that was at our house on January the 17th, I'm the first one that they've ever tried to coerce to register under this law. Nobody had ever
It's not,
registered.
well, it's not a law, it's an
It's a
ordinance.
civil, yeah, you're
So,
right,
but
it's an
is there-
ordinance.
Is there any other communities in Michigan that have done this?
That have made that law,
Mhm.
oh,
Is
yes.
there? Okay.
Yeah, my wife went on the internet and according to her, it's cookie cutter. You know, they all,
Ah,
they're getting the information primarily, of course, when I start saying things like this, I'm liable. So I understand that and I'm right, okay? Okay.
Truth is a defense.
Yes.
Last I looked.
That's correct.
Yes.
Primarily promoted by the Michigan Municipal League to try and figure out how to regulate the medical marijuana in the state of Michigan. They keep saying there's no regulation. Well, that's simply not true. The law says that if I'm a patient, I can have up to 12 plants as long as I keep them in an enclosed lock facility that's accessible only to a caregiver, which is what my wife is, or a patient.
Now, one of the things that troubles me about this is that that means it says locked facility. You're not supposed to let anybody else into that facility, right?
That's
Isn't that-
correct. And that's
So people show up in order to inspect your home. They don't have a warrant,
correct.
but they say, show us everything in your house. And if you
Correct.
did that, then you would be violating the terms of keeping that facility locked.
Correct, and that was the thing that we used in a case that you're very familiar with the Greens,
Stephen Maria Green.
Stephen Maria Green. Yes, Child Protective Services was insistent that they were going to be able to inspect their grow room and count the number of plants. Well, the state law says you can't do that. It says it's supposed to be in an enclosed lock facility, and law enforcement officials are the ones who have said, "Oh, when we got there, the door was unlocked."
You're right. Yeah.
You know, okay, well, okay, you know, sometime
Coincidence.
or another, yeah, you know,
Okay, so they're applying this only to medical marijuana
correct.
in the home. So not if I have another type of business in the home.
If you have another type of
It's gonna
business
be
in the,
easy to beat.
correct, if you have another type of business in the home, you're covered under the home occupations in 5.113 of the code, and medical marijuana is covered in 5.114 of the code. As a matter of fact, if you look at 5.113 and all of their points, you will find out that half of the comments that are there say, except if it's a medical marijuana grow,
Oh, I
except
see.
if it's a medical marijuana grow. And then the first thing that you come to, and what they actually initially charged us with, was having an unregistered medical marijuana grow, because we didn't go into the township and say, hey, we're going to grow medical marijuana at this address in your township.
And
Well,
is there any law suggesting that you have to do that? You have your
No,
licensure from the state, don't you?
no, yes, exactly. This is the point that, you know, I don't understand how they cannot understand this. If you stop me driving my car in Delhi Township, what do you ask me for?
Your driver's license.
My state driver's license or my Delhi Township driver's license? You see what
Last
I'm
I knew,
saying?
They didn't issue
Yeah,
them.
exactly.
Yeah.
See, they can't write, they can write them. They
can
just
write
can't
them,
enforce them.
right.
Are you
Yeah.
the first person that
They've tried to do this.
to litigate this? Is this moving through the courts at any level?
It's moving through the courts in a funny way, and I don't know as I could say it's moving through the courts. Originally, from the townships, they wrote me a letter in January. They wrote me a letter. They didn't write it to me. They wrote to my wife and excluded me. I guess I somehow became a non-owner of the property. They can't do that, I was told. I went to talk to them in February before their board. They wrote me a letter in March. They scheduled an informal hearing that would have taken place on April the 3rd. So my wife and I went for that emergency surgery that you're aware of. I had that on the 5th. So when I went there on the 3rd, I was not feeling real well. I really didn't want to be there. We got there and we got an order or motion. It starts out as a motion, ends up as an order that nullified the prosecution. They're not going to prosecute us at all, right? And we said, oh, okay. I told my wife I'm not real happy about this because the officers that were at our house to begin with, the Michigan medical marijuana law and their ordinance have things in them that say that the information that you get, that's confidential.
Oh, boy.
You're not supposed to share that information with anybody, and if you do, you are guilty of a misdemeanor crime that is subject to a fine of $1,000, imprisonment for up to 6 months, or both. Okay? So whoever was there of the 4 officers that were there that shared this information with the township, see that one's criminal, one's civil.
Right.
The criminal people don't have a right to share my information with this so-called civil people. Yeah, I'm not sure they're civil at this point, but
Maybe
they
not
don't.
to you, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So to try and answer your question, as far as I know, I would be the first person that would actually try to litigate this. I would be one of the few that would be.
Vic, this is the thing that really upsets me too. Now you're retired, right? And
Correct.
you're fixed income.
Correct.
And the estimates that you've had, if you had to hire a lawyer to protect yourself, somewhere between maybe $15,000, $20,000, $30,000 to go through this process. You're trying to act as your own lawyer. Means
Correct.
you're spending a huge amount of effort and stress involved
Yes.
in this.
Right.
And it just seems to me that that was never the intent of the law. You're supposed to be protected
Correct.
from this.
That's right. And the only decisions that we have had that seem to admit that or point it out is People versus Terbeek. At one point, when we were talking in front of the House committees that were trying to make changes to the medical marijuana law, I'm not sure whether it was Neil Rockhind, the lawyer, or one of the others, said that medical marijuana in the appellate courts and Supreme Courts was 0 to 17. And on those appeals, 11 of them were filed by the prosecuting attorney to begin with. So the district judges and the circuit court judges were doing the right thing. But as long as the prosecuting attorney took it further, it would be overturned in court. The last time, not the last time, second to the last time I was in court, the judge said, now that the Supreme Court has changed the law, that is a problem. We're not supposed to have courts that are writing law in the United States. We're supposed to have legislators, or in this case, the voters of the state of Michigan. The last law that I know of that was written by the voters were the bottle laws and the lottery laws.
That's true, isn't it?
Yeah, and here we are with the Michigan
don't
medical
shoot
marijuana
wolves.
law. Yeah, what's that?
Don't shoot wolves.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, the wolf thing, that's a whole nother deal. That was based on a lie. You know that, right? The fact that they were hunting them. Yeah, you do. Okay, we're going on with something
We're
different.
won't
We're
go
not
there.
going on that. No, we
What would
won't.
you like to see happen now?
I would like to make sure that we get to present every part of the law that's necessary to protect the interests that we have with that particular property. And what that's going to require is a declaratory judgment by a judge that their ordinance is not enforceable. That's the first.
When is your next time in court, and could people show up as court watchers to show support?
Well, they can do that. I'm actually under deadline to answer this complaint, and I'm answering it for 3 people, as you know, myself, my wife, and my wife's son, Zachary. We don't have a court date as yet. I have to have the paperwork filed necessary because, as I said, this is a little different. They dismissed the charges in district court. They went to circuit court, filed the charges that instead of unregistered medical marijuana grow, I'm within 650 feet of a Jehovah's Witness Assembly Hall.
Oh boy.
Consequently, according to the new changes in their new ordinance that they just passed on May the 6th of this year.
So they're going to find a way to get you.
Correct.
They're trying to
Yeah,
do.
right. Well, their new ordinance spells out a specific fine amount, $500 a day,
Oh.
90 days in jail, and $500 a day thereafter. So if they picked me up, put me in jail for 90 days, by the time I got out, I owned $45,000 in fines.
Vic, we're going to have to hold a big fundraiser for you
I'm
at some
telling
point.
you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to have Vic back, and he's going to keep us aware of this, because these are the kinds of things that kind of make you scratch your head and furrow your brow. I
Yeah.
want to thank Vic Hansens. He also is with a group called the Human solution that deals with
Yes.
some of these issues. And join us next Monday night for LCC Radio, WLNZ 89.7, Lansing Online News Radio here in Lansing. And we thank you very much for listening, and we will see you next Monday night. Thanks again to Vic and Bob
you.
and Ann, and boy, we had a whole crew tonight, and Tom, Tim, and my husband even.
Came by.